They told her she didn't belong. They said a black woman had no business running a stall on their exclusive streets. Day after day, Mary swallowed their insults, finding comfort in the one soul who didn't judge her, a silent, homeless boy she fed for free. She thought kindness was her only weapon against their hate, but she had no idea who that boy actually was. She didn't know that her simple act of charity was being watched. When two massive helicopters suddenly descended on her humble stall, the racist neighbors cheered, thinking she was finally being arrested. They were dead wrong. What stepped out of those choppers didn't just silence the crowd, it brought the entire town to its knees.
Mary was a fixture on the corner of Elm and Main, though the local residents desperately wished she wasn't. For 3 years, she had woken up at 4 a.m. to prep her ingredients, hauling her heavy cart to a neighborhood where she was the only black face for miles. Her food was incredible, the kind of soul food that stopped traffic. But to the wealthy homeowners in the high-rise condos above, she was nothing more than an eyesore. They viewed her presence as a stain on their pristine, exclusive community. They didn't see a hard-working woman trying to survive. They saw someone who didn't belong. But amidst the cold stares and the constant threat of eviction, there was one ritual that kept Mary going. Every single day at noon, a small, fragile shadow would detach itself from the alleyway. He was a homeless boy, no older than 12, with matted hair and clothes that hung off his skeletal frame like rags. While the businessmen in expensive suits stepped over him as if he were trash, Mary saw him. Without fail, she would prepare a fresh, hot plate of chicken and rice, not leftovers, but her best portion, and hand it to him. He never spoke a word. He would simply take the plate with trembling hands, eat quickly with his head down, and vanish back into the shadows. The wealthy residents watched this daily act of kindness with disgust. To them, Mary wasn't just an intruder anymore, she was attracting vermin. The whispers in the neighborhood were getting louder, and the complaints to the city council were piling up. Mary could feel the walls closing in, unaware that this silent boy was the only thing standing between her and total ruin.
The subtle tension that had been simmering for months finally boiled over on a Tuesday afternoon. It started with a woman named Mrs. Sterling, the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's image. She didn't come to the stall to buy lunch. She came with a clipboard and a scowl that could curdle milk. She marched right up to Mary's cart, not as a customer, but as an executioner. She didn't speak to Mary. She spoke at her. She ranted about property values, about the smell of spices polluting the air, and how Mary's presence was lowering the tone of the street. Mary, keeping her head down, tried to continue chopping vegetables, her hands shaking just slightly. She knew that engaging with a woman like this was a trap. Any reaction, any defense would be twisted into aggression. But then the clock struck noon. Like clockwork, the homeless boy emerged from the alley. He didn't understand the politics of the moment. He only knew he was hungry. He approached the cart with his usual quiet reverence. Mary, ignoring Mrs. Sterling's tirade, plated a warm meal and handed it to him with a gentle smile. That act of kindness was the spark that blew up the powder keg. Mrs. Sterling snapped. She didn't just use words anymore, she got physical. In a fit of performative rage, she lunged forward and slapped the plate of food right out of the boy's hands. The sound of the ceramic shattering against the pavement silenced the entire street. Hot rice and chicken splattered across the boy's worn-out shoes. He flinched, terrified, shrinking back as if he expected a beating. Mary's instinct was to protect the child, but before she could step around the cart, Mrs. Sterling was already on her phone, screaming for the police. She claimed she was being threatened. She claimed a violent vagrant and an aggressive vendor were attacking her. It was a lie so bold it stole the breath from Mary's lungs. Within minutes, the wail of sirens cut through the air. A patrol car screeched to a halt, and 2 officers stepped out. The injustice that followed was swift and brutal. They didn't interview the witnesses. They didn't look at the crying boy or the spilled food. They went straight to Mrs. Sterling, the woman in the expensive coat. She pointed a manicured finger at Mary, spinning a story of fear and assault. The officers turned to Mary, their hands hovering near their belts, their faces hard and unyielding. They didn't see a victim of harassment. They saw a suspect. They ordered Mary to step away from her cart. They demanded her permit, her ID, her life history, treating her like a criminal in front of the gathering crowd. The boy, terrified by the uniforms, tried to intervene, tried to signal that Mary was good, but one of the officers barked at him to back off or face arrest. Mary watched helplessly as the officer took out a ticket book, threatening to shut her down permanently and seize her cart. It felt like the end. The system was working exactly as it was designed to crush her. But then, a low, thumping sound began to vibrate in the distance.
The officer grabbed Mary's wrist, twisting it behind her back with unnecessary force. The cold metal of the handcuffs brushed against her skin. Mary closed her eyes, fighting back tears of humiliation. Mrs. Sterling watched with a triumphant, cruel smirk, her victory complete. The system had worked exactly as she intended. But the low thumping sound in the distance suddenly grew into a deafening roar that shook the pavement beneath their feet. The noise became unbearable, drowning out the officer's shouts. He froze, dropping Mary's arm and instinctively reaching for his weapon. The wind picked up instantly, a hurricane force, whipping dust, debris, and expensive landscaping into a blinding cloud. Mrs. Sterling screamed, covering her face. Out of the sky, 2 sleek, jet-black helicopters descended directly onto the street, their rotors slicing the air just feet above the high-rise awnings. These weren't news choppers or police vehicles. They carried no markings, emanating raw, unchecked power. They landed with precision right in front of Mary's stall, blocking the entire road. The sheer spectacle paralyzed the neighborhood. The police officers stepped back, stunned into silence. The side doors of the lead helicopter slid open with a mechanical hiss. 4 men in full tactical gear, armed with rifles slung across their chests, leaped onto the asphalt. They moved with terrifying purpose. They ignored the police. They ignored Mary. They walked straight past the trembling Mrs. Sterling to the homeless boy, who was still cowering near the spilled food. The leader of the unit, a towering figure, knelt down in the dirt, gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and spoke into his radio. The entire street held its breath to hear his words. "Target secure. We have the prince."
The silence that followed was heavier than the noise of the rotors. The boy, it turned out, was the son of a visiting foreign diplomat, a child who had gone missing weeks ago, nonverbal due to autism, lost in a city that didn't care to look for him. While the wealthy residents saw a nuisance and the police saw a vagrant, Mary had been the only one to see a human being. The commander of the unit stood up and turned to the police officers. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. He simply pointed to Mary and said, loud enough for Mrs. Sterling to hear, "This woman is the only reason he is alive." The shame on their faces was absolute. The neighbors who had called Mary an eyesore watched as the tactical team bowed to her, a sign of respect for the queen of the street who had protected their prince. Mary didn't do it for a reward, and she didn't do it for fame. She did it because she knew what it felt like to be invisible. But that day, the blindfold was ripped off a community that prided itself on sophistication yet lacked basic humanity. They were so busy policing a black woman's existence that they almost let a child starve on their doorstep. This story isn't just about a hidden prince or a helicopter rescue. It's a mirror held up to society. It forces us to ask, how many times do we let our prejudices decide who is valuable and who is trash? How many Marys are being harassed right now while holding up the pillars of our community? True nobility isn't found in a high-rise condo or a badge. It's found in the hands that serve others when the world isn't watching. So the next time you feel the urge to judge someone by their station or their skin, remember, you might just be talking to royalty.